Welcome back to another episode of How I Franchise This. I am incredibly excited to be joined by none other than Matt Jeffries. He's an operator. He has a lot of wisdom to share on franchising with us, and I'm excited for this episode. So, Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and share with the audience which brand you're currently a franchise partner with?
Sounds good. So thank you, first of all, for having me here. Excited to see how this goes. But kind of sharing a little bit about myself. Matt Jeffries. I'm originally from South America. Came to the U.S. to do my upper level education and kind of stumbled into supply chain. For the better part of 15 years, I worked for corporate America, where I led very big teams in the supply chain world. And about a year ago, I decided to take a little bit of a shift. Kind of the reason behind it was a little bit of the corporate side of things, of the reasoning why I didn't want to continue down that side. And I always had a little bit of an itch on the entrepreneurship side and really did not know where I wanted to end up. And I know we'll dig a little bit more into the details here, but eventually ended up deciding on a franchise and deciding on 1-800 Striper, which is a parking lot maintenance um, company franchise. And it's been about 4 months since I started operations. Definitely a roller coaster, but excited to dig deeper into it. But it's been a great decision, I think. Just one of those that it's very different than what you think when you go into it.
So, I got to ask, because my wife's from Colombia. Where in South America are you from originally?
I'm from Ecuador, actually, so neighboring countries.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where are you based in the United States again?
Chicago.
You're in Chicago. Okay. So you immigrate to do your education. You work in corporate America. What were you doing? Where you said supply chain, like
Yeah, so
operations?
I yeah, operation and supply chain, specifically like in the field, what I would call warehouse operations. So where you think about fulfillment centers, distribution centers, return centers all around North America. I actually moved 7 times for my jobs. So I've actually lived in 10 cities in the US and I moved in 2011.
Wow. What's
And I've lived in Chicago now 6 years. So put that all
okay?
into
So those
perspective.
moves were all quick, in a 5 year
Yeah.
period. What? I'm not gonna ask you all the cities, but what was your favorite city?
I think it's one of those interesting ones where a lot of people have asked me that question. I will tell you, each one has been like very different for the different things that I've gone through. So one of the first cities that moved me my job was with Target and moved me to this small town. It's called Valdosta, Georgia. I wouldn't say that's my favorite by any means, but I learned a ton. It was a lot of times by myself, and I got to learn a lot about myself. LA was fun. Minneapolis was an underestimated one that I really liked. But for sure, Chicago is my favorite so far.
I'm from Minnesota originally, so I love to hear
There
that.
you go.
Because some
Yeah,
people,
I worked for Target, so working for Target, you definitely have to go to Minneapolis. And at the time, I was like, I had never lived in a cold place, so it was really scary. But at the end of the day, Minneapolis for me is one of the most underrated cities in the US. It's just really fun. It has everything. I love to share this fact. From the place I lived, I was able to see 3 major sports arenas from my apartment. So it's kind of cool to have that and having a very small city that still gets big concerts, big events, etc. Like it's a really fun. Diversity was my one of the main reasons why I left, and obviously cold winters were rough.
yeah, I don't blame you. Shout out Minnesota though. So you've spent a decade, right, in large scale supply chain. You've worked at Target. I saw you were at helped at Nordstrom as well. What drew you to that world initially? And what did you take away? Like, what were some of the big learnings at that point in your career?
Yeah, so I would tell you that the supply chain in general was a little bit of a stumble. I When I left college, I'll be honest, like I'll be the first one to tell you I wasn't the best student, although I got good grades. I was not a good student. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. What I didn't know is I didn't want to have a repetitive workday. Like I didn't want every day to look the same. I wanted to tackle problems, get to be able to be creative, use my brain for it. And that's how kind of I ended up in supply chain, which is what fit all those check boxes. And then Target kind of put it together and said, hey, warehouse operations is the supply chain side of things. And then little by little, I just fell for it. And the greatest part that I would say I take away from it is One, I really learned how to manage people. I think that was one of the big things. I had about 3,500 team members at one point under my supervision, and having that connection was big. Then continuous improvement, I would say as well, like being able to find a problem, trying to figure out what the root cause really is, and then finding a solution that you can operationalize is really important. I'd say those are some of the things that I thought were going to be helpful, and although they were in the franchise world, and specifically this, it's very different, and it's good and bad, I would say, but it's been one of those things that working in a corporation as itself and start working for yourself is huge. But then working in an organization that has structure, that has foundation to something that's brand new, that's the biggest discrepancy I think I saw.
And yeah, what sparked that initial moment for you of deciding, hey, I've got this corporate job. It's probably a pretty steady, predictable paycheck. To I want to go do something entrepreneurial. I want to go own a business. Like, walk us through what first sparked that. Was it Shark Tank? Was it a friend? Was it this childhood ambition or dream? What was it?
I think there's a lot of combinations of that. I think at some point in time, coming from Ecuador and in the world that I related, a lot of people were like, if you want to be successful at some point, you have to own your business. Coming to the US was a little different, right? You have a lot of opportunities to be successful in growing through the ranks of a corporate ladder or being able to do different things from an investment perspective. There is just a lot more. What I will tell you made me change was one thing was I was starting to see that the company that I was working for and me were not aligned on what future looked like. That is where I want to live, the way of working, and it just started to shift. Nothing wrong against any of the companies. I actually love the companies I work for, the people I work with, and the people I work for. Like everybody was great, but it was just starting to be a disalignment. I think myself as a person started to grow in a different direction, and the company as well, probably in a different direction. So it started to part ways, where it got to an inflection point of being able to do that. I think I had been coming 5 years on lawn of like, hey, I wanted to own a business. And at the beginning, it started off with, I want to own a business that's passive income. And for those that are listening and hear passive income, it doesn't exist, right? Like it's just nothing out there that really is passive. So I think I learned that lesson by doing a lot of research, by figuring out what it looks like, talking to a lot of people in different business ownership perspective. To some point said, hey, you know what? I want to do something small and learn from it, and then being able to grow into it if I want to actually leave corporate America. And then kind of all these things combined into one. And I was like, hey, you know what? It's a leap of faith. It's time to do it. Let's go for it. And to be honest, even the franchising side was a little bit different because when I was going through that, I think my goal always was to buy an existing business or start a business, not necessarily a franchise. I chose the franchise world because I wanted a framework. I wanted somewhere to be able to start. Like I have an MBA, but at the same time, it's not the same thing as being able to have a script to how do you start something? How do you run something? What is going to be successful? And a franchise is kind of like a cheat code, right? I think the way that I think about it is it's not cheap, or at least I didn't believe it was cheap, but it gives you a blueprint so that you don't make mistakes. So what you're paying up front is an opportunity to learn from somebody else's mistakes that have been done down the line or past, in this case, 25 plus years ago. And you get all the benefits of those learnings to be able to then put your own business up front. So that's the way I thought about it was I think I'm going to pay up front for all these lessons learned and then being able to have something that is successful, hopefully, that will yield the benefit that I expect. And that's where I see the difference between franchising and potentially owning a business outright. Would I have done something different? I think I would have. Like I think there's a couple things that if I go through hindsight 2020, I would have potentially done differently. But I still think, like I shared earlier in the conversation today, I don't regret it. I think I learned a lot from it. I think I could have been a little bit more successful. But then I also say, like, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I wouldn't have the lessons that I have now, and that's going to be yield success in the future.
Yeah, I mean, every experience we have shapes who we are, what we know, the good and the bad, and I agree, is hindsight's 2020, like you said, and, knowing what you know now, you probably would have done things slightly differently, been more successful in certain areas, different brand, who knows? But, one thing I wanted to go back to that you'd said was you were looking around, part of the spark for you to get into business ownership was you started realizing, a lot of wealthy or successful folks were, business owners, and I wanted to share an anecdote or a story that I had a similar experience growing up. I think I was in high school, and we were as a family on like a pontoon boat on like this random lake, but it had all these like nice houses on it. And someone that we were with knew like who each of the houses belonged to and what they did. Because I remember as a kid, I was like, holy cow! Like these people are loaded and these houses are incredible and they're, beautiful and big and all this stuff. And so I started asking, the person that we were with, what do these people do? And it was like, oh, that guy, owns his own business. That guy's in sales. That guy owns his own business. That guy owns his own business. That guy is in sales. And every once in a while, there was like a doctor sprinkled in or, a lawyer sprinkled in. But like the majority were business owners, or people in sales. And I just remember in my head, I was like, all right, I'm gonna own a business or be in sales. And and it is amazing how many, because it's a numbers game at the end of the day. Like you can do well financially, you can be successful climbing the corporate ladder. But I think that funnel of the folks that actually do it is such an anomaly. It's such a rare, small percentage that going out on your own, even though it's still a small percentage, you have such a better shot of having control over your own destiny, building real wealth by doing it for yourself and taking that control into your own hands. And so hearing your story of what initially sparked you and inspired you reminded me of that. I haven't talked about that in a while. But I think it is a good reminder of this is a bit of a numbers game and you want to stack the cards in your favor. And one of the paths to financial freedom and success is clearly business ownership or sales. Yeah, and some of these other things, of course, but those two seem to have a high percentage or probability of happening. Um,
Yeah, and I think
I,
I'd love to expand on that actually, if you don't mind me interrupting
yeah,
there, because I think
go
they're
for
a
it.
combination of things as well. So don't get me wrong, like I actually told you pre podcast that I still have considerations of going back into corporate America at some point. I think it's more of a opportunity cost that I have to consider by doing it. But I think there's a big topic here that I think a lot of people neglect. Um, yes, there's a financial aspect of owning a business that is attractive. There's a financial aspect of owning a business in corporate America and being able to climb the ladder. I would tell you, like, still to this day, I was always the youngest person in my role, which is, I'm not trying to tap myself in the back, but I'm like trying to share that, like, I had the opportunity to continue. But I think a lot of people forget as well as your time is value, right? Like, that's the one resource that we all have equal and that you cannot get back. So yes, like I started to see like, hey, let's just say even CEOs, COOs, people that are like in the extreme 1% of wealth, but they're still in a position where they are spending the majority of their time doing their work, right? And I'm not saying as a business owner you won't, because you will, especially at the beginning. And I'm going through it right now. You're able to do that. But I think you start to get to a point where you then can start to trade off time for money, right? You're in a position where then potentially you're like, hey, I can hire somebody to do this. I know this well. And then being able to take yourself out of it. And I think where I would go back and I say to your actual example, but think about it as a metaphor, your houses, I would tell you the business ownership perspective. And in my opinion, is where I would say I see examples of people that are able to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and have the freedom to do it. I think that is where it really shifts, right? Like that's where you see about 100% of the people that actually have that opportunity to do that are people that have that type of mentality and are owners of business, rather than people that go through the corporate side, as an example.
Yep, that's a really good point. I think it is this time game, and no matter whether it's a CEO, COO, like you said, or a business owner, there is no shortcut. There's gonna be a ton of hard work to get to either one of those outcomes. I do agree with you, though. I thought this at Ernst and Young because I was did management consulting for a year and a half, and I remember looking at the partners, that were probably making seven figures a year in some cases, and they were still just grinding, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and they're in their 40s or, early 50s. And I was like, I don't know if I necessarily want that at that stage. Like, sure, the money is probably great and the lifestyle is great, but they are still so invested on a daily and a weekly basis. And that's where that entrepreneurial story again to me got me excited because there was this path to, I had Brian Beers on the podcast the other day. He owns, I think it's 30 Midas's auto body shops. And he said it started out as I do it. And he was like, I'm doing it all. I'm in the shops. I'm booking jobs. I'm like, and trying to work on the business 60 hours a week, killing myself. It's terrible. It's awful. It's fun. And I'm learning a lot, but it's also just terrible and awful in a lot of ways. And he's like, then I graduated to we do it, meaning I had a manager or a GM that I was working with and training up. He's like, and now I'm at a stage where they do it. Like I've got a CEO that runs my 30 locations. Like I don't really even think about it anymore, but that took him 10 years, 7 to 10 years of just grinding to get there. But he has scale now and he has infrastructure and he has a team. And to your point, I think both paths are hard, but one of them has this outcome where you can just, almost not be in it and you have your time back and it's a different lifestyle kind of choice. But both are very difficult, time consuming up front to pull off.
Yeah. I think the other part there,
Go ahead.
before you
No, go ahead.
go to the other part that I'd say is a trade-off as well that a lot of people, and maybe another rabbit hole that we could go through if we want to choose to, is there is a different feel to owning your own business than being out there, right? The big difference there is you have a paycheck when you're going to corporate America, and you like the days that you're performing or the days you don't, yes, aside from potentially losing your job if you're really not performing, like you still get the same amount of money in your bank account. And you know that you're going to be able to pay your rent, you're going to be able to pay your bills, etc., without really thinking about it that much. Versus an entrepreneurship side, like if you're going to put your effort in, you're not going to get any outcome whatsoever. The upside is higher, but as well, like you got to think about like that side. That's been actually a difficult journey for me. I've been thankful, and I am still thankful that I had done really well in my past and had the opportunity to go down this high with a little cushion. But that part psychologically is a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Hmm. I agree with that. Like I'm hooked at this point of like the ownership, the control you have, the speed at which you can go. But then I do have friends who are like, you know, getting paid very well. And I'm like, that's probably really nice where there's just a steady stream. And, when they come home, they not that they completely shut it off, but they probably shut it off more than, your average entrepreneur or business owner does. And I was like, that peace of mind is probably really nice at times too. But the grass is always greener. And I don't think I'd trade for the world, this high, the high that you experience building something, solving a problem, learning, iterating, growing your own business. Going back to, your journey and, your story. So you just, I'm glad you shared that you looked at independent businesses. You looked at non-franchise versus franchise and why you ultimately went franchise. When you decided it was the franchise route, how did you find 1-800-Striper versus the 4,000 other brands that are out there? How did you hone in on that and, what jumped out at you?
Yeah, so I went down a broker side with things, and I think my broker was an excellent one. Was able to do like an interview with me of really like, hey, what are you looking for? How you're thinking about it? What type of things are you willing to do? What type of things are you not willing to do? What type of like trying to really figure out what would make sense for me, my background that could be a good fit. And then from there, we narrowed it down to like, I want to say 20. And then I went through each one of them. I'd like think about a slide each that just said, hey, this is the big numbers. This is what they do. This is kind of the thought process. Narrow it down to 4. And then when I got to 4, I started to like really actually engage with the franchise themselves. Like, what does that look like? How do you go about like who are the people that are managing it? Talking to people that have actually owned it. And then I narrowed it down to 2. And then when I got to 2, I was really went down the rabbit hole with both of those. And at some point, obviously, I decided to go with 1-800-Striper. And I think the reason for it for me were twofold. One, I really actually like the people that own it. Like the franchise stores, like I really do like them. I think they're genuine people. They're striving to do different things for the company. And I do really believe they're good people. And that for me was invaluable. And then the second part of that is I could see the business worth I mean that from a numbers perspective, margins, from an opportunity where it's too much of a niche that I think it's not going to be disruptive too much. And I think about as well the trajectory of the franchise from a business perspective is in a great spot because they only started franchising about 2 years ago. So
Oh,
I think there's a lot of upswing still there in the sense that this is a B2B business that really hasn't been professionalized. That's the best way I can put it. And being able to find out professionalism, being able to centralize this national accounts, like becoming a name nationwide where it's like whenever you need parking lot maintenance, okay, there 1-800-Striper is one of the companies do. There's maybe a couple out there that are there, but there's not enough competition. So you combine those things from a business perspective, and I said, hey, this is where I potentially see a lot more upside in the long term than other areas of company. Another one that I had seen was more of facility services, like housekeeping and things like that. And I saw like a lot more of a harder market to win.
break into. Yeah. Okay, so you work through a broker, you're going through this iterative process, which I think is smart and helpful, right? There's no way you can adequately explore all 4,000. And, part of the reason, and not trying to plug Franzi fully here, part of the reason we're building this is how do we take the 4,000 and get it down to Matt's top five, top 10 using AI and tools that can think and, synthesize data better than the average person can. So you go through that process, you find the right brand, you've signed the agreement. What's the first like few months like for you? Is it like, holy shit, I can't believe I just did this, I'm terrified? Or was it, what did that first few months look like, feel like?
Yeah, scary is the word that I would use first. Then excited is probably second. Um, I think that's one of the things I again I go back to what I said earlier with the franchise. One of the things I did like a lot about it was there's a roadmap, right? Like I have a week by week check the box type deal of things that you need to do to get prepared so that day one is successful. Um, that made things easier, and it's like a lot easier for me to be able to like that's one of the things that I think I acknowledge of myself. I'm one of those like I want to do everything and sometimes cannot get as organized as I would like to be able to tackle all of it, right? Like, it's like, oh, I got step number 1 here, but then I remembered about step 7, so I wanted to do that. So having an organization helped a lot. Now, that is a lot for the things that were there. Aside from that, you also have the financing side, the personal side of things, like setting up your life for that business, which is very different than what you were accustomed to before, especially somebody that was working a normal 9 to 5 type deal. So I think that's the way I felt. Like the first couple months was, okay, I have a roadmap. I got to settle a lot of things that I need to figure out how to do. Like I went down the SBA route. That was a lot more complicated than I thought. Then being able to then organize yourself to be able to be successful. And because I'm in a business that is seasonal, I wanted to hurry, because the least amount of time that it took me to start up, the more I could take the first year from an income perspective to try to offset obviously the loans and all those different things. Because the first year was going to be rough regardless. I started in a rush and I still started mid-season.
Mm, okay. And looking back on what you know now, what would you have done, if anything, differently there?
And I think the franchise would love for it to hear the first one is I would have paid more attention to the details of what was put into the roadmap. I think they did a really good job of setting things up. But because I was in a hurry and because I wanted to get things done quicker, I probably missed steps that I could have done. Like I would have probably given myself 2, 3 more weeks to start up and do some things that were recommended or like call it the optional things that are like do it better and set myself up for more success. It might have been slower. I might have seen less sales this year, but I think I would be in a better position overall going into it. While I feel like I've done a lot of things, but I've had to go back and do things 2 times, and sometimes in case it's more expensive because of it.
Hmm. That's good advice. I mean, a lot of the times, especially in a mature system, there's playbooks for a reason. You bought into a franchise for a reason. And I think there's Yeah, there's sometimes to question and deviate, but from the majority of the time, yeah, if you follow the playbook, if you listen to your franchise business coach, if you talk to other franchisees that have been successful, you will learn so much about where the high value levers are and where the things that, you should kinda just leave alone are. I think that's good advice.
Yeah,
The next thing I was
I
curious.
doubled down.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I doubled down on that one as well because I think I was like, hey, you know what? I understand this. I read like 5 books about franchising and all these different things, and all the people that are successful in franchising will give you the advice: follow whatever the franchisee, so the franchise says, right? Like it's just one of those like things like embeds in your brain. But I think I was like underestimating the little things. And I think I'm not by any means I'm saying that I'm out of the program and so on, or I did things totally different. But I think I underestimated some of those little things that mean a lot in the long term. And it goes back to like I would have just gone and been a little bit more attentive to detail, making sure that I went through it with every single one of them, be more organized to be able to do that. And I think that yields it. So like as advice, if somebody's listening right now is brand new, like remember that you're not a expert at this and you're not going to be an expert for the next 5 years. So why don't you just take advice from the experts, do exactly what's done. In the long term, at least it's going to be able to give you a framework of what you believe actually will work best.
Yep. I think that's spot on. I'm curious, so you had this, successful career in corporate, teams are built up, processes are mostly in place, you've got this tremendous amount of resource, behind you. What was it like, or what's been most surprising about switching into a small owner-led business where you don't have those resources, you don't have a huge team? What's shocked you the most?
I think honestly, just the amount of hats you have to wear. I think that's the biggest thing for me is like, think about it like just perspective. We're talking about companies that I work for, we're in the hundreds of thousands of employees. So going from something like that that had very structured verticals of what is owned by what person and what teams, uh, was something that was just second nature to me. And then I move into being like the one person that has to handle it all. Uh, you just don't you underestimate how much of that just happens. Being able to say like, are you managing your finances? Are you scheduling meetings? Are you doing the follow ups? You have an HR question. Your employee doesn't show up to work. They're late. How do you manage the client? And being able to manage your entire time, both while you're building and then when you start to actually do the business, is significantly more complicated than I think I gave it credit for. And I'm still going through the process of learning that. A lot of the things in the franchise do a really good job of helping you as far as like tools and resources and being able to organize yourself to do that. And sometimes I would go back to the same thought process. Sometimes you feel like some of these things are so small, but they're small when you have 1, 2 jobs a week. But when you have 50, it really does make a big difference and you need those tools to be successful. So that's really the biggest thing that I would tell you that gave me like a different mindset is like being able to wear so many hats and needing to change those so fast is it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. Uh, and it takes a lot of organization, which is one thing that I think I need to continue to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, really prioritizing too, because you have only so many hours and there's so many tasks to do, and you need to figure out which are the highest leverage things I can do. And that's not always easy when you're your own worst enemy or you're your own, boss. You can get in your own way if you don't take a second, take your head, pick your head up and look at everything that's happening and start to get systematized and organized.
Yeah, and I think this is like a good example of it. Like when you think about it, like there's a lot of different areas, but I'm only going to simplify it to say there's two specific areas in my business right now. One of them is sales. So how do you get the funnel to be able to drive jobs that you'll do? And then the second one is executing those jobs, scheduling, making sure you're making the clients happy and so on. I just went through this in October, had a great month. Um, and a lot of the sales part of it happened prior to October and throughout the month, but it was to execute the jobs that were there. we're in the last couple of days in October, and I'm looking at my November time frame. It's like it looks significantly lighter. And I think about the last 45 days, and I think about where did I dedicate my time? And 45 days ago, I was dedicating myself as much as possible to the sales portion of it. And then come to the latter part of October, I'm dedicating myself to coordinating all those jobs that we were able to do and being able to do that. 4 or 5 hours a day just talking to clients, another 3, 4 hours a day making sure that my employees are doing what they're supposed to. But I neglect the sales part of it. So now I'm seeing the results of that. So it's how do you like make sure that you're focusing the right amount of energy in the right areas, especially when you're small, because in the future, yes, I'll have somebody for operations or maybe have somebody for sales, and you're more like the CEO coordinating, going back to your example earlier. But right now, because you're small, you have to do all of it. And it's easy to go down rabbit holes of you need to do these. This is the most important thing. But if you don't take yourself out of it a little bit and say, hey, I got 12 hours today to work. Can I sacrifice a little of XYZ to be able to make 2 hours worth of phone calls for potential clients in the future? That's, I think, the way that you need to start to think about things to be successful. And it's still a learning process for me.
Yep. Yeah, it's like what are the high leverage things again? And I think in any business as it's growing, it's got to be sales, growth, revenue, and you're probably the best suited person to do that. So how do you create a system where your ops team or your team can get what they need to get the jobs done and be there on time and know the detail without you having to do everything. It's like I always say it's like a video game. So you have to choose which resources you're going to level up or invest in next, and you have finite resources, and you have to make sure you're playing the game the right way. One
Totally.
thing you'd mentioned earlier was you said you're on the fence about potentially returning to corporate. What's that internal dialogue been like? Is it, balancing stability of some of the things we talked about, a paycheck, and the pull towards being an entrepreneur and a business owner, or what does that dialogue look like for you right now?
If I'm being very transparent, it's the opportunity cost and where I can leverage the majority of my skill sets to be more successful. Right.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example, but I think there's a big list of things that I can share from an example perspective, but this is the best one. Am I the best person to drive the operations of my business? I've done this for now 6, 7 months. I'm nowhere an expert at construction side of things or anything in this world. And I'm learning every single day a little bit more. And I think I'm becoming better. But am I the best person to do it? And the answer is probably not. So then you think about the opportunity cost. How much would it cost me to hire somebody equal or better than I to do that? And let's just say for the sake of this conversation, I'm a math guy. I'm like literally numbers. I'm spending 30 hours a week in operations. And how much would it take somebody else to do everything that I'm doing in those 30 hours? And how much do I need to pay them to do that? Okay, so let's just say for the sake of this conversation, easy math, let's just say it's $80,000. I can pay somebody to do all the 30 hours of a week that I'm doing for this operation. What do I earned with 30 hours of giving back to something different? Like I say corporate America as an example, but that could be something else. So then I think about just the bigger picture. If I am doing 20 hours of sales, 30 hours of operations, if I hired 2 people to do this, and let's just say $150,000 is what it would cost me, what can I do if I'm totally different and I dedicate 5 to 10 hours a week to this just to make sure it's supervised and to make sure that it's going the right direction?
Mhm.
That's where the opportunity cost comes into play to me. It's like I probably could make more than $150,000 somewhere else and being able to do that. And the business continues to grow. And even if I don't make any money in the business, it can continue to grow. And I think about it as an asset, right? I think about it as an investment asset and being able to do that. Now, I will share that when we talked about this earlier, like when we first scheduled this, things were a little different. I was seeing a little bit of a slowdown. I think I was going through a little bit of that roller coaster that we talked about of being able to go through like your emotions. Um, there is still those options out there, and I still think that I would like to explore all of them if the right opportunity comes, if the right corporate job comes, whatever that looks like, I'm still continuing to explore that. But I think the good part of this in my perspective is I can think about them as options. I see the opportunity to be able to go down this route and dedicate myself 100% to this, potentially even open up another business or something different, or potentially do this while I'm have another job. It's something that it can be an option. The good part about this that I feel is that I've found an opportunity to, how would I say this? To position myself to have that option,
Yep.
right? If I were to come down and right now say, hey, this is what we do, I know a little better like what I need to hire for and who the right person would be to be able to do some of the things that I was doing. And this is kind of like circles back to a little bit that conversation earlier, like what I would have done differently. Hindsight 2020, all those different things. I think I would have done it the opposite if I would have been honest. Like, I think I would have gone and said, hey, you know what? Let's think about this as a net zero. I don't want to make money for the first 2-3 years. Everything that the business would make, I would put it back into employees. And at year 2, I would have the option of saying, hey, I'm going to go all in and put my time and efforts into it. While those 2 years pass, I would have had potentially worked something out with a corporation or a company to say, hey, I'm going to work this, but I'm going to take a little bit of a pay cut and I want to dedicate 5-10 hours to this business type deal.
Yep. Yep. I think you bring up an interesting point too, is people don't realize that you have these options or you can create these options. And I remember when I left my job at Ernst and Young to go start a business, I had to go do an exit interview with a partner and tell them that I was doing that. And I was terrified. I was like, he's going to tell me you're making a terrible decision. We're a big four consulting firm and, you're on this track to be a partner and all these amazing things. And he did the exact opposite. He actually got almost a little emotional and said, Alex, my whole life, I'm successful. I've worked hard. I've done well for myself in my career, but I've had this huge regret hanging over my head because I had an idea for a business I wanted to go start in my late 20s, early 30s. And I never did it because I saw the path for myself here and it seemed steadier and safer, but I never don't think about it, and it weighs on me more than I would like to admit. And he's like, "What I'm telling you now is that if you go do this, you're not gonna regret it, and if you don't do it, you are. And all the fears and the things that you might have right now are misplaced. They're like, we will hire you back in a heartbeat because you probably now are more, well-rounded on managing people, hiring people, going to market, solving problems quickly." And hearing him say that gave me so much confidence and relief that I can always go get a corporate job. As long as you're a smart, hardworking, capable, willing to learn type of person and mentality, you're gonna have a job. You can go back to corporate America. And so if you've wanted to take this leap, if you've wanted to take this risk and go do it, do it and create those options for yourself that, Matt's talking about is you're now in a position where you have a business that kicks off cash or cash flows or, is growing and you can go hire an ops person or you can go back to corporate. You have choices. You could hire an ops person, then double down all your time on sales and expand your territory and expand your business. I mean, there's so many things that you can do now. And imagine as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, or you add another brand, or you do go back to corporate, it's just you're adding more value, you're creating more value. And I think that's what gets exciting about doing these types of things is you have an ability to expand and create value faster than the rate at which your 10% annual bonus or increase is going to ever grow.
I cannot agree more on that. And I think that's the part where like I think going back to the question as well, what convinced me to potentially do that is not only everything that you described. I think that you said it perfectly, and I think that embodies about 70% of it. The other part personally for me, it was just a good time, right? I want to have a family in the future. I want to have time for my kids and so on, but I don't have that right now. So it was a good inflection point for me to say, hey, I can dedicate a little bit out proportion amount of time to this, figure out if this is the right thing. And to your point, like you could go back if it just didn't work out, if it wasn't the best thing. And at the end of the day, the right company, in my opinion, would be something similar to your previous boss, right? Somebody that would say, hey, you just added more value to you, or worst case scenario, you stayed at the same value. But you should not be seeing this as a negative that somebody decided to leave, do something different, test it out, and being able to sit and say, hey, this wasn't for me, or it didn't work out. I might test it out again in 10 years. Who knows? But it should come with more value to a company to say, hey, this person took a risk measured it out, figured that this might not be the best thing for them right now, came back. And also you might come back refreshed, right? Like as somebody that did something for the better part of 15 years, like you go back and you think about something and you're like, you know what, the break of thinking about something different for almost a year now, not that much, but I would say if I were to go back to supply chain, I come in with a different perspective, refreshed, like a real vacation from that mind. So everything that I see now and I would go back to an operation would be, have you thought about this differently? Instead of it being like very closed minded to what I knew and what I wanted to do in the past.
Hmm. That's a really good point. I want to ask you about, you've been doing this 6 or 7 months now. What's been the most rewarding or validating part so far? Like the thing that you're like, oh, okay, this is awesome, and I'm really glad that I did this.
So for me, I think it's a couple different things. First of all, like I think just hearing from the clients and saying, "Hey, thank you so much. This is exactly what I wanted," or "You exceeded my expectations." I think that always gives you a little like reinforcement of it. Where I first started feeling better was, or feeling good, was when I started to connect with people that were potentially going to give me multiple jobs. So think about this as people that feed jobs to the striping side of things, which is like pavers, asphalt companies, seal coaters, etc. And they start to say, "Hey, you're in a perfect position because we don't want to do this anymore," or "You're going to be able to take this from all of us." Or when somebody comes and like owns 20 franchise restaurants and says, "Hey, I want you to take care of this for me every year," right? Like it just reinforces the fact that when I made the decision to, what I shared earlier with you is, I made the decision thinking that there's a niche in the market, an opportunity to take. And when you get the validation of the reasoning, you actually made the decision for this, it feels good. And it doesn't hurt that these are big accounts that are going to lead to more money, etc. But it also leads to certainty, like a little bit of that. Like when I did the math of what I expected, it's going to be like 33% reoccurring revenue, right? People that will do this every other year, etc. I think about it now, and I think that's where I want to dedicate the majority of my time, to finding those people that are able to
Mhm.
give you those. And as I started to find that and see the validation in my assumptions, that's where I felt the best.
It's those unlocks that, you do the same amount of work, but you get so much more out of, the results or the outcome because you're just being smarter about it. You're finding the choke points or the leverage points. I like that. That's an exciting piece, I think, of part of the joy of running a business is these little hacks that you kind of find in this inside info and, these
Good.
clever solutions to things. I'm curious what your day-to-day, looks like now. So you're balancing the franchise. I think you have a few other ventures. You do some consulting work, if I'm not mistaken. How do you like, what does a typical day in the life of, of Matt look like?
Unfortunately, I cannot tell you that there's a typical day, which is partially fun, but also that. I am balancing right now. I have a new venture. I won't get too much into that, with a couple partners that is probably taking about 20-25% of my time. I do some consulting that I would say about 20-25% of the time in supply chain. And then I probably would say even 60%, knowing that it's not 100% of time because I'm doing more than 100% of time, is dedicated to my business. I try to separate it into different ways of making sure that I follow up with all that's required for the franchise, making sure that you're compliant, making sure you're following up with your accounting side of things, payments, banks, all those different things take a good bit of time, more than I expected. Then second part of that's going to be then going into the sales portion of it. Have you sent the right estimates to the people? Are you following up with the calls? Are you making sure that you're trying to meet new people that will lead to more jobs, networking, finding those kind of like you said, those sparks to be able to find what that looks like. And that is going to community events. That is asking your friend that works in real estate, can you introduce me to that other person? And just trying to find different ways that will lead to connections for jobs.
Mhm.
Then the last part that I would say is just running the operation itself, from scheduling jobs to making sure that we have all the right equipment, to making sure you have the supplies needed to be able to do it, that you have to manage the weather. If the weather's not good, you have to shift a day and then you have to reschedule somebody else, and then actually doing the jobs. I'm thankful that although I did start for the first couple months actually doing the majority of the jobs myself, I have found some really good employees that now can handle the actual physical work. I'm still there. I go there before the job starts, kind of make sure that everything's good, meet the client, and I'm usually there at the end to make sure that everything's good. But now I have a little bit more free time. Uh, my day when I started was like I did all these different things that I just shared with you. My day technically ended, let's just say 7 p.m. I took a little bit of a break and then the job started at 10 p.m. and I used to go and I did it. So it was like a couple months there that I know it wasn't sustainable. But now I found a little bit of a better balance. I wouldn't say that it's balanced by any means, but I feel like it's a little more balanced.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that for you. I want to shift gears into some, kind of reflections, advice for those listening, as they start to either they're at the beginning of their search, maybe they own a unit and they're thinking about a second, or maybe they're just, flat out curious at this point. What do you think people tend to misunderstand about franchising in general, especially those coming from, senior corporate roles, such as yours?
Yeah, I think I would share this more as what I misunderstood, and maybe I had thought about it differently. There is a lot of things that you own that you think are going to be handed to you. So, although you do have a lot of the tools and resources to be successful, there's still a lot of work to be done that it's all on your shoulders. So, as an example to this, I would say the sales part of it. When I went into this, I mean, I still technically don't have any sales background, and I was just expecting jobs to be a little bit more fed to me, I would say, either through small resource spending or through just word of mouth, etc. But that part of it is totally on you. And sometimes you feel lonely out there. You're like, hey, I don't really know where my next job's going to come from. I've tried and exhausted all my resources, not working. And you get to a point where you feel like, hey, did I make the right decision? And that part for me is like a big lesson learned is like, you do need to do a lot of work and learn a lot of things and go through those ups and downs. And again, I'll kind of maybe switch this to advice and whoever is potentially looking into this. And it's both a kind of like an alert for awareness, but also a glimpse of hope, which is this is a when you do make the decision, and I believe it's for any entrepreneurship side of things, but as well franchising, since this is where we're talking about in my experience, it is a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster of emotions, a roller coaster of results, a roller coaster of all the different things that you can imagine. And there's going to be a lot of days that you feel like this is not the right decision. And there's going to be a lot of days that you love it and you're just over the moon with excitement. But acknowledging those emotions and those that psychological part of things is one of the things that I would say I went in eyes wide open, and I still feel like I would have loved to hear more people repeat it to me, because the lows feel really low and the highs feel really high, but you could be going through those two emotions in one day. And that is the hardest part for me so far. Is like I can wake up some days and I'm like, feel like this is the worst decision I've ever made. And there's other days that I wake up and I feel like this is the best decision I've ever made. Um, which one is it? I don't know. You asked me today. I'm very hopeful. I think it is an opportunity that I think can be very successful. But I know now that it's a lot of things, is the effort you put in, getting yourself out of a comfort zone and making sure that you're organizing yourself and taking those lessons learned and reaching out to people for help. Because I think that's another lesson that I think I learned is I was stubborn at the beginning to not reach out to my network, to not ask for help. And as I've gone through the last 4 months of operations, that's where I've learned so much. And as well as learning how to manage my emotions when I know that the lows are low, but you can get through it the next day. And it's just about figuring out what the next step is and just executing to that.
Yeah, something you said reminded me of this, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's a Warren Buffett quote where compounding is the most powerful force known to man. And he's talking about money and money compounding, but I think this also applies to our actions, daily, consistently. And the same thing is true as every day that you show up to 1-800 Striper and you tinker and you tweak and you learn and you try a new tactic, you try a new sales thing, you try a new operations thing. Over the period of a year, 2 years, you're going to wake up one day and be like, wow, I have this multi-million dollar or very successful business that it it felt like all of a sudden happened like this, but it was a result of those every day consistently showing up, consistently making an effort. And it's almost impossible that you wouldn't be successful by doing that as long as you keep showing up and you keep putting in that effort that'll compound over time. I really like that. I think that's great advice.
I just heard an advice from, I went to an entrepreneurship meeting, like just a lot of entrepreneurship, which is kind of talking shop, if you will. And one of the advice is somebody that's a little older and had an opportunity to own a lot of businesses over time is that an entrepreneur, and I say this for franchising and so on, it's not going to necessarily be successful right away. But a true entrepreneur is always going to be successful because of what you just described, right? Like your efforts, and just to say money 100 Striper, like we could be talking here 2 years from now and it's like, hey, this wasn't the right move. I learned a lot though. I'm going to won't move away. And if I truly want to do it down the entrepreneurship side, I'm going to open something else up. And I'm going to take all those lessons learned and being able to go about it. The message that he shared with me, it's like entrepreneurship is successful as long as you never quit. As long as you continue down the side and making sure that you're doing those different, at some point you will be successful. Same thing in sales, right? Like it's not about the yeses, it's how many no's you get, right? And if you think about the no's as, hey, I need to hit, like, if your math is like you get one for every 10 people you call, and you got to get 9 no's to get 1 yes. So when you get the no, then you should be happy because you know that you're one step closer to the yes. Same thought process I have with some of these things is I got to remind myself when those lows hit. Then it's just about like, hey, you got to tinker a little bit more and know that over time, those efforts compound, to your analogy and the quote, like you will compound that as a credit. And some point you'll see the results. Although sometimes when you're putting in 14-hour days and you see nothing, it hurts. It's hot. It's tough, but it's about reminding yourself that.
Yep, you got to power through. Well, I want to wrap up with some rapid fire, questions. So as I ask these questions, think like one word response or like one sentence responses, and you're kind of short to the point. And the first question I have is, what is your favorite franchise brand outside of 1-800 Striper?
Oh, that's a hard one. Maybe Jersey Mike's. I like Jersey Mike's.
As a customer or as a business or both?
As a customer, I didn't think about it as I would not get into restaurants if I'm being honest. But I like the consistency overall, and I think it's a brand that has an opportunity to be really successful.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. All right, what's one skill you think every entrepreneur or franchisee should master?
Resilience.
I like it. And then if you could go back to day one of ownership, what would you tell yourself? Don't do
I
it.
uh, it's not going to be perfect. I think that's the biggest advice that I would give myself. It's reminding myself that it's not going to be perfect, and don't don't fixate yourself on the perfection of the idea, and just fixate yourself in the process.
I like that. And then the last one, who's been the biggest influence on how you lead or how you operate your business?
I don't necessarily have a specific person because I think it's a combination of a lot of leaders that I've had over my career. I think about like I think, and sorry, I'm going a little long on this one sentence, but I if you were to take the better parts of every single leader that I've had, and I've been extremely lucky that I've had really great bosses and really great leaders, not only that directly were my bosses, but were around me. They've taught me so much. And I think I can combine like pieces of each one of them and put into one persona, which I try to aspire to be. And that's the person that I think has shaped me the most is this combination of all these people from my most recent boss to the first boss. And I'm thankful that I actually still have connections to all of them. And for me, those are the most influential people from a career perspective. Work ethic, values, how to treat people, how to manage people, what's important, what's not important. Um, that is the persona that I aspire to be.
That's amazing. Well, Matt, thank you for taking the time to share your story, what you had success in, what you've had question marks in, what you've learned along the way. Hugely valuable to those listening. So thank you again, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Awesome. Thank you as well. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank